Moving along then, the principal's report, assessment update.
So the recent article in the Landmark about our PARCC scores didn't cover everything, so I would like to take a few minutes to provide you some additional information to give you a full picture of the PARCC scores, and then also to update you on the other standardized tests in Illinois. So if you look at the first graph.
They don't have that, Chris, in their board packet, right, Marion?
Correct.
So are you doing a handout?
I have a projection.
Okay.
So the first graph shows that our score for ELA was a 31.1 and the state average was a 34.7. And then for math, our school average was a 20.6 and the state average was an 18.7. The state average is calculated from the scores of all high school tests. So the PARCC test is given by grade level. So students either in Algebra and English 9 take the test, Geometry and English 10, or Algebra 2 and English 11 take the test. So it's no longer by grade level, but by subject level. And so the state average was calculated using all of those scores together, even though those are three very different tests with different standards, and that's because the results at the high school level were aggregated due to the small testing volumes in particular courses, and that was because the state last year gave each school the option as to choose which test they wanted to give, whether they wanted to give Algebra and English 9, Geometry and English 10, or at the junior level. And then the chart below it shows just overall school average versus the state average. And I believe that this state average was calculated using all scores on the PARCC test, not just the high school. I had reached out to the state to confirm that, but have yet to get a response from them. So just some additional information about the PARCC test. This year we also get to choose what grade level we will be testing, and we'll be testing Geometry and English 10 again. Illinois State Board of Education stated that the comparison between schools should not be made at the high school level because of varied administration. So schools also got to choose between online or paper and pencil, and they also got to choose the level. And so as a result, you can't compare high schools because you have no idea what test they gave, because that information is not on the school report card. So unless you reach out to the school and specifically ask them, that information is not given.
So the purpose of the test was to compare schools, and the state's saying we shouldn't compare schools?
Yes.
Right, they gave us the choice of freshmen, sophomores, or juniors
No,
normally.
that part I understand. You keep getting that explanation. But the purpose of the new test was to make it a better comparison amongst the schools. And now that we got results that are pretty poor for us, we're told, or we think, we shouldn't compare ourselves to other schools.
Yes, and that was because the initial plan from the state was to test all three levels at the high school, Algebra, Geometry, and Algebra 2 Trig. But I think due to funding, they cut back to one level and then let the schools pick.
Kristen, we chose sophomores. Why?
We chose sophomores for two reasons. One, this year the initial plan was supposed to be that all juniors would take the PARCC test. So we thought that students would, by testing sophomores, students would be better prepared to take the test as a junior. And then also that had the least impact on our AP testing, which a good portion of our juniors take. And then also our freshmen take math tests. And so sophomores were a grade level that were not taking standardized tests. PARCC also is not tied to college entrance like ACT or SAT, or college credit like advanced placement. And so that's why the motivation among a lot of high school students was low to take this test. The school report card also does not show the percentage of students that did not take the test. So students could opt out, and in some districts they had a high percentage of students that opted out, and we did not have students opt out of the test at all. The test also consisted of 15.5 hours of testing, and the ACT is 3.5. So it was a very long test. It was spread out over a few days, but it was a very long test for students. Also, there was a readability study done of the PARCC questions, and it was found that the PARCC questions were written 2 grade levels higher than the grade being tested. So that also made the test more difficult for students just to read the questions being asked. There was very limited questions that were released prior to the administration of the test. Since then, there have now been 26 sample questions that have been released. The landmark article referenced schooldigger.com and how RB's ranking fell. But in looking at that website, the only information that they use to rank schools is the test scores, which are listed on the school report card. So they don't factor in anything else. And so PARCC scores right now are the only scores that are listed on the website version of the school report card. The ISBE PDF version of the school report card still contains the composite ACT score, but you have to go to that website and then retype in the school and then wait for it to generate the PDF. This year for PARCC testing, there will only be one testing window. So last year that 15.5 hours was spread out over 2 testing windows, one in March and one in April. And this time there will be one testing session in March spread out over 2 days for students for a total of 9 hours. The other measure that I referenced on the school report card is the ACT. And so, as you already know, our ACT average for the class of 2015 was 23.3, which is well above the state average of 20.5. Some additional information regarding the ACT for this year. The state has released a notice of award to the College Board, the SAT, to administer the assessment for college entrance for all 9th grade students. But right now, the state can't confirm as to whether or not that will occur this year for a few reasons. One, ACT filed a protest with the state, and so they're trying to work through that right now. And that protest was filed on December 16th, so we don't have any additional information. Additionally, they haven't passed a budget, and so they don't know whether or not they will appropriate the funds for any college entrance test for all juniors this year.
We were prepared for that, right? So what did we do?
Right, so we have already paid for or secured a test for all juniors on April 19th, and that will be allowed to be used for college entrance for our juniors.
And that'll be the ACT, though.
Correct. Some additional information about the SAT. So there is an SAT-ACT crosswalk that enables you to compare scores. But the SAT is also has been rewritten, and the new test will be released in March. And so students will start taking the new SAT in March. So I wanted to provide you some additional information regarding the new format for the SAT. There are 2 required sections, math and evidence-based reading and writing, and the essay portion is optional. We don't know when eventually students take this test through Illinois if they will fund that part or not. The main difference between the ACT and the new SAT is that the SAT has a stronger emphasis on vocabulary and it covers fewer math concepts. So it doesn't cover some of the Algebra 2 concepts that the ACT traditionally covers. So as a result, it focuses a little more on problem solving in mathematics. The new format also does not penalize students for guessing. And new with the SAT, there is a calculator portion and a non-calculator portion of the math test. So for part of the test, students will be able to use their calculator, and the other part they will not.
Can you tell us what the changes are in those 2 things? Did they they got penalized for guessing?
In the past, with the
format?
SAT, yes, they got penalized for
And
guessing.
It was calculators, no calculators, all calculators?
They got to use the calculator.
For the whole math?
Yes.
Now
Yeah.
it's part of it.
This is the first standardized test that I know of where for part of the test they use the calculator and part they don't. But that's very common in what we do with our assessments in the building. And then there are many free test preparation resources, sample questions, interactive problems and quizzes, and full-length practice tests, and that's one of the reasons I think the state went with SAT, also that it was a little cheaper. And so all of these materials will be used to eventually update our CAP course, and CAP is our college admissions preparatory course. And then lastly, one benefit of going to the ACT is that it is aligned with the College Board and AP, and so they provide schools with an AP potential score for students, and so that kind of predicts whether or not students will be successful in an AP class. So for us, that could be useful in encouraging more students to enroll in AP courses, and then also identifying some skills that students are lacking to help strengthen those before they go into an AP course. Lastly, in the spring, their state plans to administer a science test aligned to the new standards, which are the next generation science standards. And this test is supposed to be online, and it'll be about 90 minutes. And it's supposed to be given to all 10th grade students, but they are testing biology, which our freshmen take. At this time, though, there are no other details. There's no testing schedule. We have no information about the format other than it's supposed to be somewhat similar to the test that they give in Washington, D.C. for their science assessment.
Kristen, what will be the plan based on a lot of the work that's been done here well before even I got here of the EPAS growth, or from Explore to the ACT? So what will be our entrance exam if the state fully moves over to SAT?
We would continue to use our MAP test, which we currently look at when placing students, and then expand some of our assessments as well for placement tests that we've created.
Do we have, I do want to make sure that, so also the board understands is that there's some of the facts behind the PARCC, because this isn't the first time we've talked about PARCC briefly. But as you see with some of these tests, it's, when you put a group of sophomores in the room and tell them they have 15 hours of testing and they ask like what it's related to, it's kind of hard to do some motivation of you can use this as a college entrance exam, or you can use this for college credit, or basically this is an accountability measure for the state. So we wanted to give you some more background on the overall test and the makeup and the design to help answer any questions that you may have. And if the board has any questions tonight for Kristen and I, we're open for questions.
Are you going to put this on our website?
Yes, it will be included in the board packet as well.
Okay.
So
No,
what
I
is-
mean,
what
but
is-
on a RB website.
Yes, we can do
Okay.
that as well.
So what's the state assessment of the results of the PARCC test? What have they come back and said?
They said that it's good baseline data and that they expected the scores to drop. And that's about it. They were very limited as to what they released.
Yeah, they sent out
Are
a
they
bunch.
still committed to it? I mean, they're,
I think that's why he's shifting. I think you're seeing the new
All right.
state superintendent shifting more to SAT.
and then with regards to the SAT, and I know you talked briefly about it, but part of the issue we have is that we get students in from our feeder schools, and we're asking our teachers and administrators to take the growth where they come in and grow much more over the average, the state average. Are we going to be able to still link those with the SAT? Because I know the Explorer with the ACT had a good correlation. Are we going to be able to still monitor that somehow and see the growth factors and try to get those growth factors even higher?
Yes, so there is the crosswalk that I mentioned that will hold us over for the short time period. And then there are two other options. One is the SAT series does extend down to 8th grade. They have a pre-SAT series at 8th grade, 9th grade, 10th grade. So that could be an option to measure growth. And then also continuing to use ECRA, and they'll be presenting at the next board meeting. And we can look at how our students are growing through the ECRA model as well.
Would you have to go to the feeder districts and ask them to, because you said 8th grade, so would that be to modify what they're doing, or?
We could either use that as a placement test, as a possibility,
placement,
or test our freshmen as soon as they come in.
So if I'm a parent, I'm looking out there, we're ACT, now we're going to SAT, am I worried about my son or daughter not, the colleges looking at SAT differently than ACT?
I think with Illinois funding the SAT, especially state schools and more Midwestern schools are going to begin looking at SAT, and that shift has already started to occur, but I think by the state going with it, they will have to. And the new SAT format, I think, will look different, and it will look a little more aligned to the ECT.
Most schools accept either SAT or ACT already, correct?
Correct, but in the Midwest,
Predominantly
students
ACT.
predominantly take the ACT for Midwest schools.
So we have a basis here of ACT scores that go back many years. How are we going to be able to assess our performance if we're going to start off with an SAT score and know whether there was growth or improvement or from day one, from that very first test? What can we do to correlate the two?
I would rely on ECRA to assist us with that.
Okay.
So given the fact that in the landmark article, LT was not really impressed with the PARCC testing and the results and saying that it didn't really mean a lot, am I right?
Yeah, I think that's common throughout most schools in Illinois.
Okay.
Well, the concern, I talked to Kevin about this, the concern I have reading the article, which I take with a grain of salt, is everybody didn't like the test. But compared to every other school they mentioned, we did the worst. So you're providing some basis for why we may have done the worst. At least, well, I'm sure we're not the worst in the whole list, but of the schools that were in the article. And, you know, kids don't want to do it, this, that, and the other thing. But if this is what the state's going to require, how are we going to figure out a way to motivate our students to put some effort into it, regardless of whether it counts for anything or not?
Well, the 3 schools that were mentioned, 2 performed better than us, and those 3 high schools all tested freshmen. And if you look at the results statewide, they get worse and worse as you go up, which makes sense. And the grade school students are used to taking an ISAT test, which quite frankly didn't have much meaning for those students either. But the younger the students are, the more they are, willing to buy into taking a test and doing their best, and that, trickles away as students get older. So, we can always look at putting incentives in place to try to motivate students, but I don't know how long the PARCC test will be
Here's the problem
around.
I have. Whether we've had all of our students, sophomores, take 15 hours in this, and you're basically saying they don't care and the results are bad and there's nothing we can do about it. I mean, it seems like an absolute waste of time and money and effort if that's the way that we're approaching this. I mean, if the state requires it, we should figure out a way to put our best foot forward.
Well, that's one of the things I mentioned to the board at a previous board meeting, is that's why the Superintendent's Council, and I signed my name to a letter trying to significantly convince the state not to make high schools take the PARCC test, because all of us are concerned about that. How do you
Right.
make kids so that your school report card looks better? That's kind of hard to get and, intrinsically motivate a 15-year-old sophomore.
agree.
So that's one of the things when you hang out in front of them, hey, this is an ACT test, this is something you could use to get into college, or you hang out the AP test. And that's why we were trying to convince the state to let the grammar schools do PARCC and the high schools to stick with ACT. If you remember, and I remember when most of you just got on the board, and I wasn't superintendent yet, and the outgoing board was having this conversation there. The high school used to give the PSA. First day was ACT, and everybody would do their best and raise your composite ACT score, and you got to use it as a free ACT score. The second day was a test called the work keys. And I remember sitting in a board meeting as an observer when this board, or the previous board before most of you were elected in the administration, were convincing the board, going back and forth, of trying to tie that second day of testing to like free prom tickets and primary, like primary seating at graduation or exam exemptions, because it was the same exact thing. Like, you couldn't find a way to get these kids to come on that second day. And I remember when I was a high school principal, we did the same thing. We gave more rewards for how you did on the second day of the test, so they would take it serious, and get out of their exams, or, get reduced prom rate tickets or premium parking spots, because there's really not a lot to do to convince a large portion of your population to take it serious.
But would we engage the parents? Because I think we're underestimating how much the parents play a role in the ACT test that the students take, because there's money attached to the ACTs.
Sure.
Students do well, there's scholarships, the parents want to see them do well. They tell the students, you're going to go, put your best foot forward. If this isn't a good one, we're going to take it again. we're putting a lot of responsibility on the students to find that this park is important. We need to be telling our parents just as much that we're rating the school, this is your property values, this is your property tax. You need to be helping us communicate that message to your student.
The state still hasn't come down and said, let's be consistent across all the high schools and only test 9th grade or only test 10th grade. They're still letting it up to the school to choose which test to take, right?
They came out originally and said that schools needed to test the same grade level that they tested last year. So we would still be testing geometry and English 10, but there is a waiver if the schools have decided that they would like to choose something different this year.
And when the test originally came out, it was supposed to be for all juniors. And then they bumped that to where you could choose. You had 1 month window to choose and submit your, so you had some schools doing junior, sophomores. Most schools did freshmen because they felt that was the easiest group to get tested in. But the other problem with some schools found with their data with the freshman test is most of their brightest freshmen are probably taking geometry as freshmen, and so they didn't even get to be tested. So, I mean, that's why you saw some of the, North Shore schools didn't perform like they would normally, and there was so much discrepancy in the data.
Another question. Will our student services help our students, if we do switch to the SAT, to access an ACT? I know you could go online, you could register, you could take them. Would the school host, would we be a host site where they could come here and take it? Because even though the state may change, colleges are still going to be looking in the Midwest for a while for those ACT scores.
Yes, we would continue to host national test dates for
Okay.
ACT as well.
Okay.
Anything further on this side? John? Anything further over here? Yeah. Simrad?
So you understand, we know that you want us to do good on this, and we understand that.
We know you want to do good, too.
And the article and the landmark, although after you got past the title and you read through it, it was basically every curriculum director saying that this is not a good test and not good data. But we would prefer that it would be a college entrance exam, both through her principal's organization and through my superintendent organization. We're taking an advocacy road to try to get them to lock into one college exam and let us use that as our accountability measure. So, in our ACT score this year, I mean, based on the Tribune article, I don't have that in front of me, but I think we slid up to either 39 or 42 out of all the suburban and local area high schools. So we were significantly better with a 23.3 than even some of the schools mentioned. And so, okay.
Okay, thank you very much.